guys, I hope you're doing great today. DevOps Molvi here with another video on Jenkins interview questions and answers. Guys, I hope that you have watched my previous video on Terraform interview questions and answers, and it was for experienced DevOps engineers with some scenario based questions. But this video is for absolute beginners. And it is for DevOps freshers because in part A, by the way, this is part A of our Jenkins interview questions and answers. And I have covered the basic concepts and the basic questions that are asked by DevOps engineers with around 1 year of experience. So you can expect such questions in your DevOps interview if you're applying for any DevOps position. And by the way, guys, the purpose of creating these interview questions and answers video is to prepare your mindset that you can be asked from any DevOps tool, and it depends on the employer's or interviewer mood from where he or she may ask you questions from any DevOps tools like Git, Docker, Terraform, Kubernetes, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure. So these are all DevOps tools, and in any DevOps interview in any DevOps interview, you would be asked from all these DevOps tools, like from Docker, from Git, from Terraform, from Jenkins, from CICD, and so on. So make sure that you are well prepared for your DevOps engineering interview, because there are a lot of tools that you have to cover for your perfect DevOps interview. So this is actually part A of our Jenkins interview questions and answers. In part B, we will be going to cover advanced Jenkins interview questions with their answers, and also I will try my best to include the scenario based interview questions and answers. So make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. Let's get started and start with our first Jenkins interview questions and answers, and it is for DevOps freshers and DevOps beginners. Question number 1. What do you know about Jenkins? By the way, we know Jenkins is a CI/CD tool, but for our knowledge, we must know that it is open source. It is free, and it is an open source automation server which enables developers around the world to reliably build, test, and deploy their software. Also, it keeps track of the version control system. So guys, every CI/CD tool has only one purpose: to build the code, to test the code, and to deploy the code. We have discussed about CI/CD tools like GitHub Actions, GitLab CI, Travis CI, and also Jenkins. So Jenkins is loved by the developers and DevOps engineers because it comes with a lot of plugins, free plugins. And I have also mentioned it that it is written in Java, and it is a free CI/CD tool with around 1,000 plugins to integrate multiple build tools. From integration, I mean you will find a plugin for Docker, you will find a plugin for Git, and that's why you will find a plugin for Java, and so on. So there are 1,000 plugins, and Jenkins has a huge community of developers and DevOps engineers, and that's why it is one of the best and leading and free CI/CD tool we have in the market right now. So this is Jenkins. Question number 2, explain about Jenkinsfile. Jenkinsfile is a text file, and it contains the steps of a pipeline. That's the simplest definition. It's a text file. We can have it on our Git repository where we have our code, and it contains the build steps. Those steps are executed by Jenkins using that Jenkins file to build, test, and deploy our code. So this is the proper definition, that it is a text file that has a definition of Jenkins file. From definition, you can guess the build steps, okay? And is checked into the source control repository. We can have it on our Git repository, and it enables code review and iteration on the pipeline. It also permits an audit trail for the pipeline. So we can have everything in a single Jenkins file. So we must know Jenkins file when we are working with Jenkins. Okay, so this is the definition of Jenkins file. And question number 3, what is a parameter in Jenkins? Parameter is a special kind of variable in Jenkins. But why we use parameters? And this is the answer. While working with the Jenkins job, we often need to pass some parameters to the code being executed when you trigger the job. But before that, we need to check the box which says the project is parameterized. So we can pass those parameters to the pipeline, and our pipeline will be executed according to that parameter. So that's why we can use parameters in Jenkins. Question number 4. Please share a couple of parameters extensively used in Jenkins. Now you have a better understanding of a parameter. We can have a Boolean, choice. Most of the times we use choice parameters. For instance, a choice parameter can have 3 choices: dev, QA, prod. So that's how we can use parameters. And credentials, file, string, multi-line string, and password. So these are a couple of parameters. Among choice and credentials are most extensively used in every CI/CD pipeline. Question number 5. Where is the Jenkins Working Directory? We have installed Jenkins on our Linux server. So where is the Jenkins directory? And this is actually the Jenkins Working Directory is actually the Jenkins underscore home directory, and it is the root directory on the server where Jenkins is installed. Jenkins uses it to perform builds and keeps archive. Whenever we build or create a new pipeline, the Jenkins will create a workspace, and that workspace would be located in the Jenkins home directory. So this is actually the Jenkins Working Directory where Jenkins keeps all of its data. And question number 6, we have 100 pipelines in Jenkins. How the data of all these pipelines is managed by Jenkins? So it's a scenario based question, and the answer is, when we run a Jenkins pipeline, a new workspace is created on the Jenkins server. Okay, every pipeline will have its own workspace, and it is isolated from all other pipelines. So each workspace is isolated. Okay, it is an independent directory dedicated to each Jenkins project or a pipeline. Now I hope that you have a better understanding. Each workspace is different. So our every project will have a separate workspace, and all those workspaces would be in our Jenkins home directory, and the code, data, files, secrets, build, artifacts, images are stored in their respective workspaces. Okay, if we have our Jenkins in varlib Jenkins, you must able to find that there would be a number of folders among we will have workspaces, and in the workspaces directory we will have the separate folders for our pipelines or our projects. Okay, so where Jenkins store everything, okay, like code, data, files, secrets, build, and artifacts. What is a freestyle project? If you are a DevOps beginner, you must know about freestyle projects, right? So we start with freestyle projects because they are easy to learn Jenkins, and freestyle projects are the most basic types of CI/CD builds, and it is a good idea to start with freestyle projects to play around with Jenkins. Since everything is UI based, we have the user interface and we don't have to write any scripts, and it is totally a user interface of Jenkins where we can create a freestyle project. In short, freestyle projects are the basics of Jenkins, suitable for less complex scenarios. So for instance, in our software project there are no complexities, then we can have freestyle projects. Freestyle projects are really easy to get started with Jenkins. Question number 8. What are the 2 different types of pipelines in Jenkins? Now there are actually 2 major types of pipelines in Jenkins. Number 1, declarative pipeline, and it requires Blue Ocean plugin to use graphical pipeline editor. Blue Ocean is a utility in Jenkins, and you can see the console, you can see the build steps. So we must have a blue ocean plugin to use declarative pipeline, and number two, scripted pipelines, and it is the original pipeline syntax for Jenkins, and it is based on Groovy scripting language. So for now, we must know there are two types of pipelines. For declarative pipelines, we need to have Blue Ocean plugin, and for scripted pipelines, which are the original syntax of Jenkins, and those pipelines are based on Groovy scripting language. By the way, guys, for your advancement in your DevOps career, you are going to work with Groovy scripts while working on Jenkins. So in our advanced Jenkins tutorials, we have to learn about Groovy scripts. Okay. Question number 9. Can we run bash scripts in Jenkins? Of course we can. It is possible to use bash scripts, and the good news is we can use bash scripts both in Freestyle projects and in also Jenkinsfile. Okay, and I have also mentioned where we can run our bash scripts. Execute shell box is used for the scripts. There is a shell box, and in Jenkinsfile we can add a new stage, and inside that stage a new step can be added, starting with like sh and our script. So it is possible to run bash scripts both in Freestyle projects and in Jenkinsfile. Question number 10. I have dev QA prod environments. What would I do to select the build according to the environments? Like we discussed the parameterized project. So this is how we can do it. Number one, we need to check the box saying this project is parameterized. So this is a further explanation now that your concept about parameters in Jenkins should be clear. Number two, the quickest way is to add choice parameters. Number three, we can add choices as per our environments. Now, I hope that you can see the image, and this image says that this project is parameterized, and I have the environment, which is the choice parameter, and there are three choices: dev, staging, and prod. It will ask us about the environment before each build. When any project is parameterized, we have to select that parameter, and that pipeline will run accordingly. So that's how we can add parameters. Question number 11. Which plugins did you install for your Jenkins CI/CD setup? If you have set up Jenkins on your virtual machine, on your personal computer, or in any dev Linux machine, so you must have installed these frequently used Jenkins plugins. Number one, Git, Jira, Docker plugin, Pipeline, SSH, Maven, AWS, EC2. So these are the most commonly used Jenkins plugins. And by the way, we have over 1,000 Jenkins plugins. So you can mention the plugins that you have installed. Okay. Question number 12. What is Jenkins Git plugin used for? So we have the Git plugin, we have SSH. Every plugin has a specific use. So why we use Git plugin? And Jenkins is of no use if we don't install the Git plugin. So that's my opinion. And Git plugin can pull, fetch, checkout, branch, list, merge, tag, and push repositories. So guys, since our code is on GitHub, so we have to install the Git plugin. Git plugin makes it really easy, and it integrate Jenkins with our version control system. So Git is the most used plugin on Jenkins. Question number 13. What is Git poll SCM used for in Jenkins? Really easy question, and I hope that you know the answer. And poll SCM, source code management, periodically checks the repositories for changes. Since developers are writing the code, they are pushing the code every time. So in case of any changes in the Git repository, the builds are automatically triggered for every push, for every commit. But this is our choice if we want to automatically if we want to have our pipelines automatically built, but most of the production pipelines do not have this option checked by default, so we can try it for our dev VM. Question number 14. Can we restrict the number of builds of a certain pipeline? Of course we can, and you can see I have mentioned and took the screenshot. You can see if not empty, only up to this number of builds records are kept. So we can have up to 10 builds on our server. Okay, so that's how we can restrict the number of builds of a certain pipeline and to avoid storage issues on our Jenkins servers. Question number 15. Difference between poll SCM, build periodically, and webhooks. What is the difference? Three terms and frequently used terms in Jenkins. Number one, poll SCM periodically checks the repositories for changes. And number two, build periodically, it initiates builds on fixed time intervals. We can schedule those times, and there is scheduling option in Jenkins. And number three, webhooks. The webhooks receive direct notifications from the version control system like Git. We can have webhooks enabled on our Jenkins pipelines. So these are three different terms, and this is the difference in poll SCM, periodical, build periodically, and webhooks. Each term is different. We can check the repositories for changes in poll SCM. We can initiate builds on fixed time slots, and in webhooks, our Jenkins server will receive direct notification from our version control system like Git. Question number 16. Why poll SCM is so important? After all, why we use poll SCM option in Jenkins? And the answer is poll SCM is crucial for continuous integration as it automates the process for monitoring the changes in the source code repository, and this also ensures that Jenkins initiates builds whenever there is a new code commits. Okay, whenever any developer who is writing the code commits any change, the pipeline will automatically trigger, and it is only possible when we use poll SCM in Jenkins. And it also helps developers to get quick feedback and make changes accordingly. If they commit, the code is quickly built, tested, and deployed, and they can find the changes and they can modify or tweak their code accordingly. Question number 17. How Jenkins identify the changes through poll SCM? We have our code on Git and our pipelines are running on Jenkins. So how Jenkins know that there are some changes happening inside the code and I should start the pipeline? So Jenkins compares the current state of the repository with the previous state during poll SCM. And if there are any changes in the current state, it will, of course, start the build process. It uses the version control system's mechanisms like commit timestamps or revision numbers to identify new changes. So these are two important terms, that commits timestamps or revision numbers, and Jenkins uses these two options to identify whether there are any changes inside the code, and if there are changes that are detected by Jenkins, Jenkins will initiate the pipeline. Question number 18. Where does Jenkins store its credentials? So the answer is the secrets and credentials are stored in the following locations on Jenkins CICD servers, which is a Linux server. This is our Jenkins home directory, which can be varlib Jenkins, and inside there is a folder, secrets folder. So we must know the path where our secrets are stored. On Linux servers, the Jenkins home directory is varlib Jenkins. When we install Jenkins, this directory, home directory, is created by default, and inside that directory we have our workspaces, we have our pipeline artifacts, and so on. So we have our secrets stored here as well. Question number 19. What is a parallel stage in Jenkins pipeline? And the answer is parallel stages allow multiple stages to run concurrently. Just like we in our graduation we had studied about parallel computing, means computing in parallel. So similarly we have parallel pipelines, and parallel stages mean that we can run multiple stages at the same time. Multiple stages mean to build, test, and deploy multiple at the same time, and it will reduce build times by executing tasks like tests simultaneously. So we can, for instance, there are a number of tests, and we can run all those tests in parallel to reduce our pipeline execution time. Question number 20. How do you implement retry mechanisms for a failing stage in our build, test, or deploy? If, for instance, deploy stage is failing, so how I can have my pipeline to retry this stage and rebuild the code and redeploy it? So we can use the retry block in Jenkins pipelines to attempt for a failing stage which has failed multiple times, and it is useful for handling transient errors. Now from transient error, what do we mean? And I also have explained what can be those errors. For instance, if there is any network outages, our running pipeline will fail. And if there are any unavailability of a service, any service is not responding, and timeouts that occur when a service is busy, there are any power fluctuations, and if we are facing such errors and issues, our pipelines can fail. So we can add the retry block in our Jenkins pipeline, that if there are any such issues or errors, our pipeline should retry and it should complete successfully. Question number 21. What are the best practices for managing Jenkins pipelines? We have multiple pipelines on our Jenkins server for our dev environment, for QA, for sandbox, for prod. So how we can manage all these pipelines? What should be the best practices? And as a DevOps engineers, we must know that number one, we should regularly back up our Jenkins instance to ensure we can restore it if there is any misconfiguration, accidental job deletion, or data corruption. If we are having our Jenkins server on our AWS cloud, we should take regular snapshots of our EC2 VM where our Jenkins server is running. Number two, store the Jenkins file in SCM, version it, and test it. We have our Jenkins file on our Git, so we should version it and test it. Number three, running multiple jobs simultaneously can cause collisions and issues when a service is created or access is needed. Number four, the project type automatically discovers, manages, and executes pipelines for branches that contains a Jenkins file in source control. And number five, we should avoid very large shared libraries. Question number 22. How do we integrate Jenkins with Slack? This is also a common question, and the process is easy. We can use the Slack notification plugin. We have a plugin for Slack notification, and we can set up a webhook allowing Jenkins to post job statuses or other notifications to Slack channels. Okay, so we can use the Jenkins Slack notification plugin. That's the answer. Question number 23. Can we run Docker commands directly in a pipeline? Of course we can run. And we can run all Docker commands in a Jenkins pipeline with the help of plugin. The Docker plugin, okay? The answer is plugin. Where there is any issue, there is a plugin in Jenkins. Jenkins can build, test, and deploy Docker images using plugins by running Docker commands directly in a CICD pipeline. Question number 24. What is agent any in Jenkins pipeline syntax? Our Jenkins file starts with agent any. What does this mean? and this is the basic, the first step of our Jenkins file. So we must know about the first step. Agent any allows the pipeline to run on any available Jenkins node. Since we are running Jenkins on our single VM, so we don't have to specify the node, but for master and slave nodes, we have to specify a specific node or label if needed, and that's for master slave Jenkins servers and agents. Question number 25. What is a multi-branch pipeline? And a multiple branch pipeline automatically creates pipelines for each branch in a source code repository and enabling branch specific CI/CD processes. So this is the general concept of a multi-branch pipeline. We have a pipeline for each branch in our source code repository. Question number 26. After we install Jenkins, what are the initial steps we should take to secure Jenkins? And the answer is, right after installing Jenkins, we must secure it. This is the first step, and the first step would be really easy. We have to enable security under manage Jenkins, configure global security to set up authentication, authorization, and restrict public access. So this is the basic step to secure our Jenkins. Question number 27. What is a post section in Jenkins? And the answer is, the post section allows defining actions that run at the end of a pipeline or stage regardless of the build status, whether our pipeline is a success or failure. So we have a post section and it defines actions that run at the end of the pipeline. Question number 28. Where does Jenkins store job configurations? We know that we have this warlib Jenkins home directory, and job configurations are stored in XML files inside the Jenkins home directory, and the full path is warlib Jenkins jobs. Question number 29. How do you configure Jenkins to use GitHub for source control? And the answer is, we must use the Git plugin to connect with GitHub, setting up credentials and the repository URL. Webhooks can also be set up for automatic build triggering on code pushes. So I think that this is a repetitive question. By the way, after installing Git plugin, we can use the token, GitHub access token, and that token is used to authenticate and used as credentials. Question number 30. What is a webhook in Jenkins? A webhook in Jenkins is a mechanism that allows a third-party service like GitHub to send real-time updates to Jenkins. So Jenkins is always aware what's happening on GitHub with the code. So that's why we have webhooks. And these updates are triggered by events or actions or comments in the third-party service, such as a push to a repository or a pull request creation. And also Jenkins can then automatically respond to these updates by building and testing the code or triggering other actions. So that's the purpose of webhooks. Question number 31. What is a workspace in Jenkins? And the answer is, Jenkins Workspace is a directory where Jenkins builds our projects. And I have added some more explanation. When a job is run, Jenkins creates a workspace directory specific to that job and checks out the source code from your SCM into this directory. So each project will have a workspace. Each pipeline will have a workspace which is isolated. Question number 32. What are some common Jenkins pipeline errors and how do you debug them? The common errors include syntax errors, missing credentials, and plugin issues. And debugging typically involves examining the console output. You must know that we have a console output of every CI/CD pipeline, so we can check the syntax errors or other issues while we are running pipeline. Question number 33. What is cloning in Jenkins? So the answer is cloning is a commonly used to replicate. So the answer is cloning is commonly used to replicate jobs for similar projects or environments, such as creating jobs for different branches of the same repository or for different deployment environments, for instance, staging and production. So cloning actually saves the time because we don't have to write the jobs again and again. We can just simply clone it. It is just like copy and pasting. Question number 34. What would be the added benefits of cloning? Now, more details. So, number one, saves time by reusing existing configurations. Number two, reduces errors by ensuring that similar jobs have consistent settings. And number three, facilitates easy modification of jobs to adjust only specific parameters while keeping the main configuration intact. So we don't have to work more while creating new jobs. We can use the previous job configurations and settings to create more jobs. And this is really a common practice while we are creating Jenkins pipelines. Alright guys, our last question, question number 35. What is a Jenkins build artifact? And build artifacts are files produced by a build, such as compiled binaries or test reports that Jenkins can archive and store them for future use. Artifact is just like a jar file. You know that a jar file is built. So this Jenkins also builds artifacts, and those are compiled binaries or test reports, and Jenkins save them and archives them for any further or future use. So guys, that's the end of the video. Make sure that you watch Terraform interview questions and answers part B and part A as well, because I have included the most frequently asked questions and answers, and this was our first part A of Jenkins interview questions with very basic conceptual questions and their answers. And if you have worked as a DevOps engineer for around 1 year on Jenkins, I hope that you know all these concepts and their questions and their answers. I am also creating lectures on Google Cloud Platform. Make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. I will watch you in next chapter. Stay tuned and have a good one. Bye.